My name is Jasmine Williams. I am 35 years old, and until 9 days ago, I was a head nurse in the trauma unit. I spent my life surrounded by the rhythm of monitors, the smell of antiseptic, and the desperate struggle to keep the living from slipping into the dark. I thought I had seen everything there was to see about the end of life. I thought death was just the stopping of a heart, the cooling of skin, a silence that follows the roar of a crisis. I was wrong. On March 1st, 2026, the world I knew vanished in a blur of gray rain and twisted metal. I was driving to my night shift when a heavy transport truck hydroplaned across the median. There was no time to pray, only the sudden, terrifying sight of headlights and the screech of tires on wet asphalt. The impact was a thunderclap that shattered the world. My car was crushed like a discarded tin, and for a moment, I was trapped in a box of jagged glass and cold rain. I felt the heat of my own blood and the strange, distant sensation of my bones breaking. Then, the scene shifted. I was no longer in my car. I was being rushed into my own emergency room. I saw my colleagues, people I had shared coffee with hours before, their faces pale with the kind of shock I had only ever seen in others. I heard the flatline of the monitor. I heard the lead doctor call out the time of death. I watched from the ceiling as they covered my face with a white sheet. What happened next is something I struggle to put into earthly words. I wasn't in a dark tunnel or a cold void. I was simply elsewhere. I was standing in a place where the air itself seemed to be made of liquid gold and music. My body felt light, stripped of the exhaustion and the ache of my injuries. There was a peace there that was not just the absence of noise, but a presence that filled every gap in my soul. And then I saw him. I did not need to be told who he was. I didn't see a figure from a stained glass window or a painting. I saw the very definition of life itself. He was taller than I expected, dressed in robes that seemed to be woven from the morning sun. But it was his eyes that changed me. They were like deep wells of fire and honey, seeing everything I had ever been, every secret I had kept, and every kindness I had ever shown. I felt a surge of honesty so powerful I fell to my knees. I didn't feel judged. I felt known. I felt a love so heavy and so pure that I wept, not from sadness, but from the sheer relief of finally being home. "Jasmine," he said. His voice didn't travel through the air. It blossomed inside my chest like a heartbeat. "You have returned for a moment, but your work is not finished. The hour is late, and the world is deaf to the sounds of its own undoing. You must see what is coming so that those who can still hear may prepare." He took my hand, and his touch felt like a current of strength flowing into me. The light around us began to shift, and suddenly I was looking down at the earth, but it was not the world as it stood on the day of my accident. The garden where we stood seemed to breathe with its own rhythm. Every leaf on the trees that surrounded us sparkled with an inner light, as if they were composed of living emeralds. There was no sun in the sky, yet everything was perfectly illuminated by a glow that emanated from Jesus himself. I felt my nurse's instincts, the part of me that always looks for wounds to heal or rhythms to track, begin to dissolve in his presence. There was no sickness here, no decay. He looked at me, and I felt as though my entire life was being held in a gentle, warm hand. I saw myself as a young girl, then as a student, then as a weary woman in the hospital hallways, and he loved every version of me with the same fierce intensity. I realized then that my work in the trauma unit had been a preparation, a way to teach me how to stand in the middle of a storm and not lose my focus. He began to walk, and as he did, the ground beneath our feet changed. It became like glass, showing me the world below, as if I were looking through a telescope that could see into the very hearts of men. I saw cities teeming with people who were running in circles, chasing after things that were already turning to dust. I saw their worries, mortgages, reputations, the latest trends, and from this height, they looked like gray threads tangling around their ankles, tripping them as they tried to find happiness. Jesus stopped and pointed toward the east. The atmosphere grew heavy, and the golden light turned into a deep, warning shade of amber. "Look at the mountains," he said, and suddenly I was there, hovering over the rugged terrain of the Middle East. I could smell the dust and the scent of parched earth. I could see the borders where soldiers stood in silence, their fingers resting on the triggers of weapons that looked far more advanced than anything I had seen on the news. There was a tension in the air, a physical weight that felt like the moment right before a massive heart attack begins. I saw spiritual beings, dark and jagged, whispering into the ears of leaders, feeding them old hatreds and new ambitions. These were not myths. They were real, and they were orchestrating a dance of death. The date March 16, 2026, surged into my mind with the force of a tidal wave. It was as if the very fabric of time was shouting that day. I saw the clock strike midnight in that region, and the silence was shattered by a streak of light across the sky. It wasn't just one missile, but a flurry of them, launching from hidden places beneath the sand. I watched as the horizon in Iran erupted into a wall of violet and orange flames. The earth groaned, a sound so deep it felt like it was coming from the center of the planet. "Look at the pride of men," he said. "They believe they are fighting for land and power, but they are opening a door that they cannot close." On March 16th, this war will transition from a local fire to a global furnace. It will draw the nations into a knot of anger that cannot be untied by treaties. This is the first shaking, a warning that the safety they have built on the sands of politics is failing. The vision intensified. I saw the reaction of the world in real time. In Washington, I saw rooms filled with men and women in suits, their faces bathed in the harsh light of monitors, their voices rising in a panicked roar. They were making decisions that would affect millions, yet they were acting out of fear, not wisdom. I saw the ships in the Mediterranean and the Persian Gulf beginning to move in patterns that looked like a great predator closing in on its prey. The conflict was spreading like a drop of ink in a glass of water, darkening everything it touched. I saw the faces of mothers in distant villages, clutching their children as the sky turned a bruised purple. I saw the smoke from those explosions drifting across the oceans, carrying with it a spirit of confusion that began to settle over the entire earth. Jesus turned his gaze back to me, and the vision of the war faded into the background, though the sound of the distant explosions remained as a low thrum in the air. "The fire you see is but a mirror of the fire in their hearts," he told me. "They have forgotten the source of life and have chosen the path of destruction." This event on March 16th is the bell that will wake the world from its long sleep, but many will wake up only to find themselves in a nightmare of their own making. I felt the immense grief in his heart, a sorrow that was so vast it could have drowned the world. Yet he remained perfectly composed, perfectly in control. I saw that he wasn't surprised by the violence. He had warned of it for ages, but his warnings had been treated as ancient stories or things that only happened to other people. Now it was happening to everyone. I saw the ripple effect of the March 16 event hitting the shores of America. I saw the stock markets flickering and failing, the numbers turning red and then disappearing altogether. I saw people at gas stations and grocery stores, their eyes darting around with a new kind of suspicion. The peace they had relied on, the peace of a full stomach and a stable government, was cracking. Behind the physical war, he showed me the spiritual front. I saw angels standing at the four corners of the earth, holding back winds of even greater destruction, waiting for a signal. I saw that the time of grace was being held open by a very thin thread. He showed me the prayers of the faithful, rising like small bright sparks from the darkness. Some were in basements, some in grand cathedrals, some were just whispered breaths from hospital beds. Each spark reached his heart, and I saw his expression soften for a moment. "These are the ones who keep the world from total darkness," he said. "But even for them, the trial must come. The gold must be refined." We moved through a sequence of images that showed the days immediately following the start of the conflict. I saw a darkness that was not just a lack of light, but a presence. People were beginning to feel a heavy, spiritual cloud settling over their homes. I saw families who had never prayed together suddenly gathered around tables, trying to remember the words to the Lord's Prayer. I saw Bibles being pulled from dusty shelves, their pages crisp and unread. The urgency was growing. The world was realizing that the old rules no longer applied. The power of the great nations was being revealed as a hollow shell. No amount of money or military might could stop the spiritual shift that had been triggered. As the smoke of the burning cities in the east filled my vision, Jesus led me toward a different scene. We were no longer over the desert, but over the great oceans. I saw the water churning, not from a storm of wind, but from a stirring deep below. It was as if the earth itself was preparing to give birth to something monumental. He showed me the hearts of world leaders, which were like dark, knotted roots. They were plotting, even as their cities burned, trying to find a way to maintain their control. They used language that sounded like peace, but their hearts were full of sharp edges. I saw the March 16 event as a catalyst that broke the trust between the East and the West once and for all. It wasn't just a war, it was the end of the illusion of global unity. The world was splitting into camps, and the middle ground was disappearing. I saw that the information people relied on was becoming a weapon. Truth was being buried under a mountain of lies, and people were wandering in a fog, not knowing who to believe or where to turn. The fountain of truth is being poisoned, Jesus said. And those who do not drink from my well will find themselves dying of thirst in a land of plenty. The vision began to pull back, and I saw the entire globe again. It was pulsing with a rhythmic red light like a heart in distress. The dates I had been shown were like milestones on a path that led to a great precipice. March 16th was the first step over the edge. I felt the vibration of the coming days in my very soul. I wanted to reach out and stop the missiles, to whisper peace into the ears of the soldiers, but I knew that this was a path humanity had chosen. The role I had was to witness and to warn. The scene around us transformed again, the violent ambers and purples of the war vision dissolving into a strange flickering gray. We were no longer looking at the physical soil of the earth, but at the invisible veins that connected every home, every office, and every hand. I saw a vast, shimmering web of light that wrapped around the globe like a glowing shroud. It was beautiful in a cold, artificial way, a lattice of pulses and signals that never slept. I understood that this was the heartbeat of modern life, the banking networks, the streams of information, the satellite links, and the endless chatter of the world. It was the foundation upon which everyone had built their security. Jesus looked at this web with an expression of profound mercy. He didn't look at the technology itself, but at the way people had tied their very souls to it. I saw millions of people staring into small, glowing rectangles in their palms, their faces reflecting a pale, ghostly light. They looked like prisoners who didn't know they were behind bars. They were fed a constant stream of noise, a relentless flow of images and words that kept them from ever hearing the silence of their own spirits. The world has built a tower that reaches the heavens, he said, his voice vibrating with the weight of eternity. But this tower is made of light and mirrors. It has no substance. It has become a fake strength, a prop that they lean on so they do not have to walk with me. When the prop is removed, they will realize they have forgotten how to stand. The date March 22nd, 2026 appeared before me, written in letters of steady, silver fire. The vision shifted to that morning. I saw a woman in a grocery store, her cart filled with bread and milk, her children tugging at her coat. She swiped a piece of plastic at the counter, but the machine stayed dark. She tried again, her movements becoming frantic. Behind her, the line began to grow, and the air filled with the sharp scent of rising panic. It wasn't just her card, it was the entire system. The registers were silent. The lights in the store began to flicker and then died, leaving everyone in a dim, dusty gloom. I saw this same scene playing out in 1,000 cities at once. In London, the great glass towers of the financial district became silent tombs. Traders stared at blank screens that refused to tell them how much they were worth. I watched as the numbers that represented the wealth of nations simply vanished into the air. It wasn't a theft, it was an erasure. The digital world was being pulled back like a rug, and everyone was falling. The second warning will destroy confidence in everything they thought was permanent, Jesus told me. On March 22nd, the systems that govern their daily existence will cease to respond. For 72 hours, the world will descend into a profound quiet. The money they worshipped will become unreachable. The news they obsessed over will become a void. This is the famine of the truth, Jasmine. When the world's voice is silenced, they will be forced to listen to the voice they have ignored for so long. He showed me the interior of homes during those 3 days of darkness. I saw a man sitting in his living room, staring at his useless phone as if it were a dead god. He didn't know the names of his neighbors. He didn't know how to comfort his crying wife without the distraction of a screen. I saw the hollow look in his eyes, a spiritual hunger that was far more painful than the lack of food. The world had become so dependent on the invisible web that without it, they didn't know who they were. Their identity was tied to their accounts, their status, and their digital presence. When those things were gone, they felt like ghosts. I saw the hospital where I used to work. The backup generators were humming, but the machines were confused. The records that told us which patient needed which medicine had vanished. My colleagues were running through the hallways with clipboards, trying to use their memories and their instincts to save lives. It was a struggle against a tide of darkness. I saw the fear in the eyes of the sick, who felt that the very fabric of reality was tearing. They have trusted in the works of their own hands, Jesus said, his hand resting on my shoulder. They have made a God out of information and a religion out of convenience. On March 22nd, I will show them that these things are as fragile as a spider's house. I am not doing this to punish them, but to wake them. I am stripping away the false comforts so that they might find the true comforter. The vision expanded to show the famine of truth. I saw that even when the systems briefly flickered back to life, the words being spoken were no longer recognizable. It was as if a spirit of confusion had been poured out. One person would say peace, and another would hear war. A leader would give an instruction, and it would be interpreted as a threat. The language of the world was breaking down. People were wandering in a fog of rumors and half-truths, unable to tell what was real and what was a lie. This was the most terrifying part of the vision, the loss of a shared reality. I saw people gathered in small groups on street corners, talking in hushed, desperate voices. Some were pointing to the sky, remembering the fire in the east from a few days prior. Others were weeping, realizing that their life savings had evaporated into a digital mist. But in the midst of this gloom, I saw small pockets of light. I saw a family sharing their last loaf of bread with a stranger. I saw an old man teaching a group of young people how to pray, his voice steady and calm in the middle of the uproar. These people were not afraid. They had a different kind of support, one that didn't depend on electricity or bank balances. Jesus pointed to these small lights. Do you see them, Jasmine? These are the ones who have already built their house on the rock. When the storm comes, they do not wash away. The March 22nd warning is for those who are still building on the sand. It is a final call to move their foundation before the great harvest begins. I saw a vision of the great libraries and the massive centers where the world's knowledge was stored. The lights in these buildings were out, and the rows of servers were cold and silent. I realized that the progress humanity was so proud of was entirely dependent on a power source they did not control. They were like children playing with a toy that had been unplugged. The arrogance of the scientists and the tech giants was gone, replaced by a whimpering confusion. They searched for a hidden language to fix the problem, but the pattern was beyond their understanding. It was a spiritual lock that no human hand could turn. The atmosphere in the vision grew even more heavy. I felt the weight of the billions of souls who were currently living in a state of total unpreparedness. It was like seeing a massive ship heading toward an iceberg in the middle of the night, while the passengers were busy dancing and drinking, refusing to look at the horizon. The War of March 16 had been the first jolt, the sound of the hull scraping the ice. The collapse of March 22nd was the water beginning to pour into the lower decks. I saw the leaders of the earth meeting in secret bunkers, lit by emergency candles. They were trying to find someone to blame. They pointed fingers at the east, at the rebels, at the heavens themselves. They refused to admit their own helplessness. They were already planning how to use the chaos to tighten their grip on the people, to create new rules and new systems of control. But I saw that their plans were like smoke. They were trying to catch the wind with a net. Jesus turned me toward a mountain that overlooked a great city. The city was dark, the streets filled with abandoned cars. The only sound was the wind whistling through the canyons of steel and glass. The world thinks that the end comes with a roar, he said, but often it begins with a silence. The silence of March 22nd is a holy pause. It is the breath before the final shout, Tell them to use the silence. Tell them to stop running and to look upward. The time of playing with shadows is over. I felt the immense pull of this silence. It was a heavy, expectant thing, like the air before a massive summer storm. In that silence, I saw people beginning to have dreams. I saw a young woman in a high-rise apartment waking up in tears because she had seen a vision of a cross made of stars. I saw a soldier in a distant land dropping his weapon because he heard a voice calling his name in the middle of the night. The Lord was using the darkness of the world to shine his light directly into the hearts of men. The vision began to swirl, and the gray fog of the systemic collapse started to thin, revealing a different kind of light. It was no longer the artificial glow of the digital web or the fiery orange of the war. It was a pale, shimmering silver, like the light of a moon, that was far too close to the earth. I knew we were moving toward the final revelation. I saw the days between March 22nd and the end of the month as a time of intense searching. The world was in a state of shock, but that shock was opening doors that had been locked for generations. People were asking the big questions again. Why are we here? What happens when we die? Is there a God who cares? The superficial answers of the past were no longer enough. The bread in circuses had failed. "Watch the sky, Jasmine," Jesus whispered. The garden around us seemed to lean in, as if the very trees were waiting for what was next. The physical shaking and the systemic shaking are only the beginning. The final shaking will be the soul of the world itself. The shimmering silver light I had seen in the distance began to rush toward us, or perhaps we were rushing toward it. The garden of living light around Jesus seemed to vibrate with a frequency of pure worship, every flower and stream humming a melody that spoke of the Creator's glory. I felt my own heart sinking with that rhythm, a heartbeat of peace that defied the chaos I had witnessed in the world below. Jesus looked at me, and I saw the reflection of the whole world in his eyes. The billions of souls, each one precious, each one known by name. He was not just a king or a teacher. He was the very breath of life, the source from which all existence flowed. I realized that the trauma I had seen in the hospital, the broken bodies I had tried to mend, were only small fragments of a much larger story of brokenness that he was now preparing to heal with fire and light. We moved closer to the edge of the heavenly realm, and the veil between what is seen and what is unseen began to thin until it was as transparent as a window. The date March 31st, 2026, manifested in the air like a seal of gold and blood. It was a date that felt final, a culmination of all the warnings that had come before. I looked down and saw the earth bathed in the aftermath of the silence from March 22. The world was still reeling, the cities dark, the people hollowed out by the loss of their digital gods. But on this morning, as the sun began to rise over the horizon, something changed in the very atmosphere. The air didn't just carry the scent of the morning, it carried the weight of the divine. Suddenly, a second light appeared in the sky. It was not another sun in the physical sense, but a manifestation of the throne of grace. It burned with a crimson fire that did not scorch the earth, but pierced through the hearts of every living creature. I saw people in every corner of the globe stop in their tracks. In the middle of the war zones in the east, soldiers dropped their rifles as the red glow illuminated the smoke of the 2026 Iran conflict. In the dark apartments of the west, families ran to their balconies, staring at a sky that was peeling back like a heavy curtain. The stars didn't fall. They simply faded as the glory of the Father began to pour through the rift. "The final warning," he whispered, and his voice was like the sound of many waters, deep and resonant. By the end of March, the harvest begins. The door of grace that has been open for centuries will begin to swing shut. This is not a secret event. It is the great revelation. Every knee will bow, but for many, it will be the bow of terror rather than the bow of love. I watched as the spiritual realm became fully visible to the human eye. I saw the great host of heaven, beings of immense power and beauty, standing in the clouds. They weren't the soft, winged figures of storybooks. They were warriors of light, their faces shining like lightning, their presence demanding an answer from every soul. I saw people falling to their faces in the streets. I saw some screaming in agony as the light revealed the hidden rot in their hearts, the lies they had told themselves for decades. Others were lifted up by a joy so intense they seemed to glow with the same light as the sky. The division was absolute. There was no middle ground left. You either belonged to the light or you were consumed by the shadows of your own rejection. I saw the harvest taking place. It was a movement of souls, like a great wind blowing through a field of wheat. Those who had prepared their hearts, who had sought the Lord in the silence of March 22nd, were being gathered. I saw them being drawn upward, their earthly burdens falling away like old rags. Among them were the poor, the forgotten, the sick I had cared for in the wards, and the children whose faith was as pure as the light itself. It was a moment of supreme beauty, a homecoming that the earth had been groaning for since the beginning of time. But I also saw the doors closing. I saw the light beginning to recede from those who had turned their backs, who had cursed the sky even as the glory revealed itself. Their faces were etched with a final, terrible realization. The time had run out. Jesus turned back to me, and the garden began to fade, replaced by a sense of immense pressure. I felt the weight of my mortal body calling me back. The coldness of the hospital room, the smell of the antiseptic, and the sound of the machines. But before I left, he held my gaze one last time. You must tell them, Jasmine. Tell them that the things they see on the news are not accidents. The war in Iran, the collapse of their systems, the signs in the heavens, these are my messengers. I am calling them home. I am calling them to the only safety that exists. The return was like being plunged into a freezing ocean. The transition from the warmth of his presence to the pain of my broken bones was almost more than I could bear. I felt the jolt of the electricity as the doctors tried one last time to bring me back. I felt the tube in my throat and the heavy, sluggish beat of my heart as it started again. I wanted to cry out for the light, to go back to the garden, but the mission he gave me was burning in my chest like a coal. I spent the next several days in the ICU, unable to speak but screaming the message in my mind. The doctors called it a miracle of medicine, but I knew better. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the crimson sky of March 31. I saw the faces of the people I had seen in the vision. I realized that my life as a nurse had only been a shadow of my true calling. I was no longer there to just keep bodies alive. I was there to tell people how to live forever. When I was finally able to talk, I didn't ask for water or food. I asked for my husband. I asked for the pastor. I asked for anyone who would listen. The world outside the hospital walls is moving toward the dates I was shown. Today, March 10th, the news is full of the tension in the Middle East. People are talking about the 2026 Iran conflict, as if it's just another political move, a strategic play for oil or land. They don't see the dark spirits whispering in the ears of the generals. They don't see the spiritual gates being unbarred. But I see it. I feel the countdown in my blood. Every time I see a person looking at their phone, I want to grab them and tell them to look up. I want to tell them that the digital world they love is about to fail them on March 22nd, and that they need to find a truth that doesn't require a battery or a signal. My life is completely different now. I can't go back to the trauma unit and pretend that the rhythm of the monitors is the most important thing. I spend my hours sharing this message with whoever I can. Some listen with tears in their eyes, sensing the truth of it in their own spirits. Others look at me with the same pity I used to feel for the confused patients in the psych ward. But I am not confused. I have seen the source. I have seen the end of the world as we know it and the beginning of the world as it was meant to be. I am a watchman now, standing on the wall of a city that doesn't realize the storm is already here. March is the month of the turning. It is the month when the patience of the Lord meets the stubbornness of man. The war of March 16th will be the wake-up call that many will ignore. The systemic collapse of March 22nd will be the stripping away of the idols. And the glory of March 31 will be the final signature of the King on the history of this age. There are no more delays. The time of grace is not a permanent state. It is a window, and that window is beginning to slide shut. I find myself praying for the people I used to work with, the doctors who think they are the masters of life and death. I pray for the patients who are so worried about their earthly recovery that they forget they have a soul that needs healing. I tell everyone I meet, do not look for a crutch to get you through the day. Do not look for a code to unlock the secrets of the universe. Look for the person. Look for Jesus. He is the only one who can stand in the middle of the fire of March 16th and keep you cool. He is the only one who can fill the silence of March 22nd with a song of hope. The intensity of my experience has left me with a clarity that is almost painful. I see the vanity of our daily lives, the way we spend our energy on things that will be gone in a moment. I see the famine of truth already beginning, as people argue over shadows while the light is right in front of them. My baptism on March 5th was the outward sign of this inward death to the world. I am no longer Jasmine the nurse. I am Jasmine the witness. I am here to tell you that the King is coming, and his arrival will be the most beautiful and terrifying thing you have ever seen. If you are listening to these words, do not let them pass as just another voice among thousands. I am here alive by grace to tell you that the time we have left is short, and that what Jesus showed me is about to begin. Subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next warnings we will publish as events approach. Write in the comments the country you are following us from. We will pray for your nation that it may find mercy when the heavens shake, and share this message with anyone you love, even with those who do not believe. There will be no second chance when the signs begin. Every passing day brings us one step closer to what I saw. Do not remain indifferent. Do not be found unprepared. Jesus is calling those who have ears to hear, and today that voice has reached you.